Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Optics in Action, where we spotlight leaders with vision and clarity. And today I am super excited to have with us a special guest, Onofrio Pirrotta. I hope I got the name right there. You can correct me if I got it wrong. He is the Senior Vice President and Managing Director of Kindle. And so we're going to learn a little bit about the why, what, and how Kindle is changing the world in terms of infrastructure, IT services, cybersecurity, generative AI. I'm sure this could go a lot of different ways. So welcome, Onofrio. Appreciate having you on.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Appreciate you inviting me to the podcast.
My pleasure. So I always like to ask my guests when we first start, why do you do what you do? What are you passionate about? Why do you do what you do?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. And for me personally, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing and the reason I've been in the technology space really for the past 20 years, 21 plus years, is that I love seeing the impact and the change we can drive leveraging technology for specific purposes, and usually purposes with good intentions behind it to change the outcome of our customers' business. It really, for me, seeing that progress, actually getting something accomplished with the implementation or leveraging technology for me is extremely gratifying. Sometimes I think about it, if I wasn't doing this, I'd be doing something like in architecture or construction, right? Just being able to get involved with something and designing something and seeing an end product. And it, for me, is really rewarding from a career perspective.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that perspective. It's the impact that technology can have on people is something that's incredibly powerful. I think we're seeing a lot of concern and disruption, probably a lot of professional services and those types of things today with the rise of generative AI and with all these dynamics and changes going on, but impacting humans, impacting people, impacting the world is really the best use of technology.
Yeah. 100% agree. And you're right. Of course, there's a tremendous amount of buzz around generative AI, but it's not only that, or geopolitical factors and what we're hearing about TikTok and other platforms that collect user data, how Europe's handling data privacy issues versus the US and other parts of the world. 100% right. And I agree that technology at the end of the day, the human impact and the human dynamic element of how we're leveraging some of the emerging trends, and not only the ones that there's a lot of buzz about now in terms of generative AI, but as well as those that have been around for much longer than that in terms of AI in general, right? Not generative AI, but traditional AI, machine learning. Sure. And before that, trends in mobility and cloud and some of the other things that have emerged over 20 years. At the end of the day, they all impact people, right? Because that to me is where the magic happens.
Absolutely. We often talk about the intersection of people and process. And I think that process or technology without people is really wasted. If it doesn't enable us to do something more effectively or more efficiently, it's wasted. The corollary to that is that people without process get frustrated. And we can see this a lot of times when processes are broken or handoffs between departments or handoffs between businesses are broken. It creates enormous amounts of frustration and cost and waste and all those types of things. So what do you do in that space? What are some of the things that you're doing at Kindle that are helping to transform some of that?
Yeah, and you're right. It's like the kind of the classic old school consulting triangle of people, process, and technology. But so look, Kyndryl's one of the largest technology service providers in the world. We operate across 100 different countries and markets. We've got anywhere from 85 to 90,000 employees. We're a spin-off from IBM. We spun out about 2.5+ years ago. So we like to call ourselves the world's largest startup company. But so we were fortunate enough to have a rich heritage in terms of working with and serving some of the largest Fortune 500 enterprises at a global level, right? So when you think about Kyndryl, I often get asked the question, so what does Kyndryl do? Well, if you think a lot about the core systems that we interact with in our everyday lives, banking systems, payment systems, airline reservation systems, the infrastructure that supports industrial companies and manufacturing companies, and the systems that support our transportation and leisure companies. A lot of the infrastructure and the systems that run those companies, we as Kyndryl help support and run. And in doing so, we've been doing it for a number of years, well over 30, 40 years in terms of that enterprise level services, deeply rooted in discipline around process engineering, right? So that ability to not only implement new technology, as you can imagine in our world, we must be concurrent in terms of new technology that's evolving and how we leverage emerging technologies to impact our current IT estates within our customers. But there's an element of people and process in that, right? So there's change management, there's communication, there's training and adoption, certainly from the people side. And then the process side, I think we probably, and those of us that have been in the industry long enough, have been part of projects that don't go so well because we didn't plan for the process change to take advantage of a new. We just think, hey, if you buy something, you take it off the shelf, you implement it, it's got to work. No, there's a lot of change, or there could be change that needs to happen around process optimization or reimagining processes, quite frankly, to make that successful. So that's what we have a lot of experience in doing at Kyndryl, and have been doing that successfully for over 2.5 years since we spun out.
That's fantastic. And I think it's such a great perspective. I think sometimes organizations will implement software with that mindset that if I just buy this new software platform, it's just going to solve all my problems.
That's right.
And the reality is that balance of understanding the habits and behaviors of the people in your business and how they interact with the current systems and processes today, that change management is probably I don't know, I don't want to oversell it as the most important thing, but I've just experienced it and seen it over and over where folks try to implement some software change with the hope and expectation it's going to solve something, but they don't get the right people engaged and think about the habits and behaviors that need to change of their people to fully utilize and fully implement the new system.
Yeah, I 100% but I agree with you. And I think especially around leveraging the software ecosystem, and it's changed a bit with the advent of SaaS platforms and platforms where you can actually pull down services out of a software package rather than having implemented a big COTS platform off the shelf. It's made it a little more flexible. But you're right. In my experience over the years, that's been a big pain point, right? Not taking enough time to understand what needs to happen from a process perspective to take advantage of the new capabilities from a software package that you're rolling out or a change you're implementing. But sometimes the reality is maybe we need to rethink the process entirely. It's not just incremental changes. Maybe we need to reimagine and really change everything we're doing to take advantage of some of the more transformational trends. Like we really see that in generative AI, right? Where a lot of our customers that we work with and some of my peers that I talk to in other companies, they're still dealing with customers that are looking at changing a process or some business function at the margin rather than totally reimagining how they engage with their customers or their employees, right? Or how they're leveraging data from their operational OT environment to improve their business performance with generative AI. It's almost like they're looking at just making marginal changes versus really transforming or rethinking an entire approach. But you're right, I 100% agree. That's been a big pain point over the years.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you just made about this assessment, this overall looking at and reimagining your business around how could technology enable different elements of flow through the organization or through the systems. There's oftentimes organizations operate within individual processes, within individual silos, and they may have something documented about this is how the finance person does their job, and this is how the construction manager does their job, and this is how the operations manager, and they document processes in this isolation. And that opportunity with digital transformation is one of the things I love, like really exploring and looking at, because that opportunity to really transform a business. I had, for example, a customer just a few months ago called me and they're like, hey, we have this billing process, this invoicing process problem. And when I went in and started observing the billing process, invoicing, billing, like, that's a pretty simple, straightforward process. If everything else upstream from it goes the way it's supposed to, the invoice should be simple, right? Like how many parts how many widgets did we sell at what price to, you know, what are the payment terms? That should be incredibly simple. But when you look at the handoffs and the challenges and the interactions between people and systems and all these things, you start seeing that like half of their invoices were super easy to process. And the other half, they were spending all this time like wandering around and calling people and talking to people and trying to. And so I think that reimagining, when you look at these symptomatic problems, and then you look at, so how does that work with your organization and with some of your solutions? As you
Yeah.
think about that, do you see that a lot where it's like, hey, we have these symptoms of a problem. But then you look at the whole system and what's
Yeah.
causing them.
We see it all the time. And for us, a big portion of our business is what we call Kyndryl Consult, right? So that's a consulting organization we have that really helps work with our customers to really deep dive into that process or that organizational change element in advance of doing a transformational initiative. But by the way, we keep talking in terms of digital transformation, these projects, not everything has to be a huge implementation that takes years. A lot of our customers don't have 3 to 5 years for an ROI around a specific project. It's really critical to lay out those milestones as you begin a journey, right? What the end state or the eventual, there really isn't technically an end state. The most successful companies that I've worked with and have seen be successful in terms of leveraging technology and really impacting their business are in a continual state of transformation and change. It's a continuous process. It's not we're going to do this for a year, 60, one project, and we're done. It's continuous improvement in an agile fashion. But so we have an organization that helps customers think through that. And it depends on, you really have to meet the organization and the customer where they're at in their journey. And we work with customers of all different sizes. Our heritage is large global enterprises. But for example, we're going to release a press release on a company that we just started working with last year called NIBCO, small family-owned flow control system manufacturer. They do operate global, mostly in North America. But they're a smaller company, family, like I said, privately owned. And they had a unique challenge in that they were growing faster than their systems could support, which is a good problem to have, right? The influx of funds into the manufacturing arena and infrastructure, right? So they had a great problem. And working with a company like that is much different than working with a company that's been around 50 or 100 years. That's a global
Enterprise
public, because when you're comment about these processes stacked upon, we see that all the time, right? I think business processes, especially for larger enterprises, it's like either fatty tissue or it's like the legislative code in the US, right? Nothing is ever taken away. Everything is additive, accretive, right? They come out with a new law, nothing's ever reversed. It's just added, right? Added. So in these companies, it's really difficult to optimize a process because it's built over years of bad processes stacked. Whereas other companies that are smaller, more nimble, or like we saw with the companies that were born on the web, like the Netflixes of the world, right? They had the opportunity to completely develop a new operating model and go to market model because they were born on cloud, versus a lot of our customers now are trying to leverage the advantages of going to hyperscalers and some of the value they drive in innovation in their platforms, but they're not born on the cloud. So they have a massive amount of value and investments in their existing technology estate and the data they have in that, trying to marry it with capabilities that they're leveraging from a hyperscaler platform. And that's really another big opportunity that Kyndryl helps our customers with tremendously.
Yeah. I think I heard one of the things I heard you talking about in that was the roadmap. Like, it doesn't have to be a big 3 to 5 year digital transformation. No. In fact, it probably will be, right? If you're going to continue to evolve with technology and things like that. But finding those milestones, those key wins along the way that enable you to keep moving towards some master plan, right? Continue to move down that path. Did I hear that kind of in the right way?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Look, some programs are just going to take longer than others, but what I've seen customers be really successful in is setting out an agenda, right? A North Star that they follow with certain tenets that they're aligned around, and they get stakeholder buy-in and agreement around those tenets. And they put together a plan with phase gates or milestones that get them to that North Star eventually. And things are going to change. And look, most of our customers can't wait, like I said, 3 to 5 years to get value out of an investment. But it takes time to set a thoughtful strategy in place in terms of really transforming a business model or a customer engagement model or whatever it is that you're looking to do. But in order to continue to get investment and buy-in from the board or your investors or whoever the stakeholders are, you've got to demonstrate some early wins, some success, right? Otherwise, it's going to be challenged as you move down that life cycle of the program. Yeah, I think having that long-term focus that you're aligned and framing out a rough perspective on what your North Stars are, and then putting together a thoughtful approach on showing value, incremental value over time is really critical to successful transformations.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think I definitely share that perspective. So as you think about some of these new challenges that have been evolving rapidly, I think cybersecurity, obviously it's been something we've been talking about for decades, but it's becoming more and more critical. And then we've got generative AI and intellectual property rights around these things. And
Yeah.
I've got some clients who are concerned about using ChatGPT or things like that. What is cybersecurity and information security, all these types of things? What does that look like over the next 5 to 10 years, you think?
Yeah, it's a really interesting and exciting space. It is a topic of conversation with our customers now it used to be something years ago that was a bit siloed in terms of here's our security solution or something we're doing in the cybersecurity space. We've seen that dynamic really change to where everything that a customer does has a cybersecurity thread, data protection thread running through it, no matter what the program, project, initiative is. And it may be nothing really associated with technology per se. There is a cybersecurity or data protection thread running through it. A lot of that's driven down, obviously, as due to the requirements that various countries and regions are implementing here in the US. The SEC requirements around disclosure for audits and for publicly traded companies, right, are really driving our customers to rethink and address immediately potential exposures in their environment. So for us, it's an area we're heavily investing in from a Kyndryl perspective. We have a number of security operation centers that we've opened at a global level, but not to overcomplicate things for larger companies and even some of the smaller companies. What we're seeing now is customers have tool sprawl in the cybersecurity space, right? It's such a dynamic part of our industry. There's so many great companies that have developed unique platforms, solutions, software packages, some hardware packages that over the past 5 to 10 years, customers bought one of each, but now they've got 80 different tools and they're looking for rationalization because it's very difficult to manage your cyber estate and protect your assets if you're also managing 80 different pieces of that and inputs and outputs and data around that. So our customers are looking more for simplification, for assistance in getting value out of a smaller core set of tools and flexibility, right? Because like I said, that area is changing so quickly. There's new innovation coming out. They don't want to be locked into a product or a platform for 3 to 5 years that doesn't offer them that flexibility or innovation. So for us at Kyndryl, we've developed, like I said, cyber operational security centers, but we also have a platform that customers can subscribe to in a modular fashion, leverage certain service packs out of that platform for specific purposes in the cybersecurity space without having to commit to something at a much broader perspective that locks them in. But yeah, it's a really exciting space for us and for me and specifically my team in the US, the convergence of OT and IT, traditional IT for corporations, OT being operational technology, the technology that runs the systems that manufacture and control processes for these customers. Those are typically two separate realms, right? And they controlled access and security in different ways, and they didn't like to talk or deal with each other over the past few years. That, or more than the past few years, but it's really been accelerated over the past 5 years. Those two worlds have collided and have really now created a huge opportunity for us and other providers like Kyndryl to help our clients accelerate the journey over that convergence from a cybersecurity perspective.
Yeah, yeah. So what type of organizations are you typically helping the most or focused on? Is it large enterprises, small to mid-size? Is there a target size of company or type of industry that you're primarily focused on?
Yeah, at a high level, Kyndryl traditionally, like we've been more focused on larger enterprises, global enterprises, but we're seeing more and more interactions with small and mid-tier companies as well, just because of their continued investment in technology. And now, whereas the larger enterprises, the Fortune 500 has always had somewhat, of a focus on their technology budget, the small and mid-sized companies are realizing that they can take advantage of some of these trends and have to be a digital enterprise in order to compete. So we're seeing a lot of opportunity there. In the US, we go to market. So Kyndryl goes to market by country for the most part. The US is our largest operating unit. It's about a quarter of our revenue globally. And we go to market by industry verticals. So you've got financial services, we've got public sector and government and federal, you've got transportation and leisure, telecommunications and high tech. And then the industry that I run is manufacturing and energy. And that's really made up of a couple of different segments. We've got chemical and petroleum energy, right? So think of the companies that produce and then also distribute from a utility perspective energy. And the other portion is aero, auto, and electronics and manufacturing, right? So those are the companies, your autos and big fives, as well as the providers. Those are the companies we deal with. And like I said, it's really again, our heritage just being a large global service provider is the larger enterprises, but we're seeing a lot of activity and great engagement with some of the mid-tier companies as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are starting to see the real benefit of those integrations and how that can help to be more competitive in the near to midterm. So awesome. Thank you very much, Onofrio, for being on this episode of Optics in Action. How do people get in contact with you or learn more?
Hey, yeah, happy to chat. If anybody wants to reach out, you can grab me on LinkedIn and just message me on LinkedIn. You can also go to our website, Kyndryl.com, and there's an area that you can get in direct contact. And if all else fails, feel free to send me a direct email. It's my first name dot last name at Kyndryl.com.
Fantastic. I appreciate having you on today. And I'm sure our guests have learned some really clear things about generative AI and cybersecurity, all the things that are going on there. So appreciate your time today.
Yeah, looking forward to do it again, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.